Most people think wealth reveals character. I spent 43 years listening to confessions in a small office with brown leather chairs, and I can tell you this: wealth doesn't reveal character, it creates it. And sometimes it destroys it in ways you'd never imagine until you're sitting across from someone who has everything and feels like they have nothing. Today, I want to share a story that still keeps me up some nights. A story about three successful CEOs, a homeless girl they never saw coming, and a moral test that stripped every illusion away. This isn't about redemption or karma or good people winning. This is about what happens when we're forced to choose between what we want and who we want to be. And trust me, that choice is uglier than anyone admits. Now, I need you to picture something with me. Imagine you're at the top. You've built empires. Your name opens doors. Your signature moves millions. Now, imagine someone appears with nothing, asking for something you could easily give, and suddenly your entire sense of self is on trial. Curious, inviting. Have you ever been there? Tell me in the comments, because I think more of us have stood at that crossroads than we're willing to admit. This story came to me through a man named Victor. He walked into my office in March of 2018, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. But his hands were shaking. That's always the tell. You can hide fear in your voice, your face, even your posture, but the hands don't lie.
Victor was one of three CEOs invited to an exclusive wealth summit in Singapore. These weren't your average business conferences with motivational speakers and networking brunches. This was where billionaires went to discuss power, legacy, and influence behind closed doors. The kind of place where decisions get made that shift entire economies. He told me the ballroom was extraordinary. Chandeliers worth more than houses, tables set with crystal that caught light like trapped stars. But what he remembered most was the silence. Wealth has its own kind of quiet. It's not peaceful, it's expectant, like everyone's waiting for someone to make the first move that matters. Victor was there with two other CEOs. Marcus, a tech mogul who'd built his fortune in artificial intelligence and automation. Brilliant mind, Victor said, but cold in the way engineers can be when they see people as variables in an equation. And then there was Diane, self-made, hospitality empire, started from nothing and never let anyone forget it. She wore her success like armor. The event was supposed to be 3 days of presentations, private dinners, and connections that could change your business overnight. But on the second evening, something happened that none of them expected. They were being escorted to a private dining room, just the three of them, when they passed through a service corridor. And that's where they saw her. A girl, maybe 19 or 20, sitting against the wall near the kitchen entrance. She was thin, wearing clothes that had been worn too many times, and her eyes were doing that thing eyes do when someone has stopped expecting anything good. Here's what Victor told me, and I'll never forget how his voice changed when he said it. I saw her, and for half a second, I felt something. Not pity, not disgust, just this flash of recognition, like I was seeing a version of myself from another timeline. Then Marcus made a joke about security getting sloppy, and the moment was gone. They walked past her, all three of them, and they went to dinner. The meal was exceptional, Victor said. Wagyu beef, wine older than most people's careers, desserts that looked like art installations. They talked about market trends, political shifts, strategic partnerships. They laughed, they made plans. They completely forgot about the girl in the hallway. Until the door opened and she walked in. I want you to understand something about power. When you have it, you get used to controlling every room you enter. You decide when conversations start and end. You decide who matters. So when someone appears who wasn't invited, who doesn't belong, your first instinct isn't compassion, it's irritation. Victor admitted that to me. His first thought wasn't concern for her well-being, it was annoyance that his evening was being interrupted. She stood there in the doorway, and a security guard appeared immediately behind her, apologizing, reaching for her arm, but she spoke before he could pull her away. "I have a question for you," she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised all of them. Diane stood up, already reaching for her phone, probably to complain to event management. Marcus just stared, the kind of analytical stare that treats humans like data points. But Victor, for reasons he still couldn't fully explain to me, said 3 words that changed everything. "Let her speak." The girl walked to the center of the room. The security guard hovered near the door, confused, waiting for someone to tell him what to do. And she looked at each of them, one by one, and she said something that sounded almost rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it. "I've been homeless for 2 years. I came here because I heard powerful people gather in this hotel, and I thought maybe someone could help me, not with money, with a job, with a chance. I'm smart. I can work. I just need someone to see me." There was a long silence, the kind that feels like pressure building in your skull. Then she said the thing that made this story what it became. "But I realize now that's not how your world works. So I'm offering you something different. A game, a test, and whoever wins gets something worth more than any deal you'll make this week." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. "A homeless girl is offering us a game?" She didn't flinch. "I'm offering you a choice, and the winner walks away richer than they came in. I promise you that." Victor told me he should have walked out right then. Should have called security, gone back to his room, forgotten the whole thing. But something in her eyes stopped him. There was no desperation there, no pleading, just this cold, clear certainty. And people with certainty are dangerous, no matter how powerless they seem. "What's the game?" Diane asked. And just like that, they were all in. The girl reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. She set it on the table. Inside this envelope is a task. Something simple, something anyone in this room could do without breaking a sweat. But here's the catch. Only one of you gets to open it. Only one of you gets to complete it. And only one of you gets what's inside. The other 2 walk away with nothing. You have to decide among yourselves who gets the envelope. You have 60 seconds, starting now. And she sat down in the empty chair and waited.
Victor said the first 10 seconds were chaos. Marcus stood up, angry, calling it a ridiculous stunt. Diane was already on her phone trying to get security back in the room. But Victor was staring at the envelope. Because something about the way the girl had said it, the way she'd placed it on the table like a contract, like an offering, made him feel like this wasn't a prank. This was something else. "Wait," he said. "Just wait." Diane looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're actually entertaining this?" "What do we lose by choosing?" Victor asked. 60 seconds, that's all she's asking. Marcus sat back down, arms crossed. "Fine, 60 seconds, then she's out and we forget this happened." But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where human nature does what it always does when resources get scarce, even imaginary ones. They started competing. It began subtle. Marcus said he'd be the best choice because he was used to solving complex problems under pressure. Diane countered that she understood people better than either of them, so whatever the task was, she'd execute it with precision. And Victor, in a move he later told me he was ashamed of, said he was the one who had allowed the girl to speak in the first place, so by rights, he'd earned the opportunity. 3 brilliant, successful, powerful people arguing over an envelope from a homeless girl they didn't know, containing a task they hadn't seen, promising a reward that hadn't been defined. The girl just watched. She didn't smile. She didn't intervene. She was studying them the way a scientist studies rats in a maze. 30 seconds, she said quietly. The argument escalated. Voices got louder. Diane accused Marcus of arrogance. Marcus accused Victor of sentimentality. Victor accused both of them of missing the point, though he couldn't articulate what the point actually was. And then, with 15 seconds left, Diane did something that revealed
everything. She reached for the envelope. Marcus grabbed her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her. We didn't agree. I don't need your agreement, Diane said. I'm taking it. Victor stood up. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. 3 people who controlled boards and budgets and entire companies, reduced to a physical standoff over a piece of paper. Time's up, the girl said. They all froze. The envelope sat in the center of the table, untouched. The girl stood slowly. You couldn't decide. That tells me everything I need to know. Wait, Victor said. Give us another minute. No, she said simply. The test is over. Marcus laughed, but it was a nervous laugh now. What test? You said there was a task. You said someone would win. The girl picked up the envelope and held it up. The task was simple. All you had to do was agree. Agree that one of you would open this envelope and the other 2 would walk away without anger, without resentment, without competition. In 60 seconds, you turned on each other, you grabbed, you argued, you proved exactly what I thought you'd prove. She opened the envelope herself. Inside was a check, $10,000. This was never about the money, she said. This was about seeing if successful people, people with everything, could show basic cooperation and trust when something was on the line. You couldn't. Victor told me his face burned, not with anger, with shame, because she was right. So what happens now? Diane asked, and her voice was different now, smaller. The girl put the check back in the envelope. Now I give this to the kitchen staff who let me stay in the corridor tonight, people who don't have power or wealth or titles. And I walk away knowing that the people at the top aren't better. They're just luckier. And that luck makes them meaner. She walked toward the door. Security had returned, hovering nervously, but no one stopped her this time. She paused at the threshold and looked back. You asked who walks away richer. None of you do. Because you just spent 60 seconds showing yourselves exactly who you are, and that's a truth you can't buy your way out of. Then she left. Victor said they sat in silence for almost 5 minutes. Nobody touched their food, nobody made eye contact. Eventually, Marcus made an excuse and left. Diane followed, and Victor sat alone in that expensive room surrounded by half-eaten luxury and felt poorer than he'd ever felt in his life. But the story doesn't end there. Because 2 days later, Victor did something. He found the girl. It took private investigators, phone calls, favors. He tracked her to a shelter across the city. And when he found her, he didn't offer money. He offered a job, a real one, in his company. Entry level, but with a path forward if she wanted it. She looked at him for a long time before she answered. Why? She asked. Because you were right, and I need people who can see through me around. I need to be uncomfortable sometimes. I need to remember that success isn't the same as wisdom. She took the job. That's how she ended up in my office 2 years later, because Victor recommended she talk to someone about the trauma she'd been carrying. Trauma from homelessness, from invisibility, from learning that the world rewards coldness more than it rewards kindness. Her name was Anna. And she told me something in our sessions that I think about constantly. That night wasn't about testing them. It was about testing myself. I wanted to see if I could stand in a room with power and not flinch, not beg, not shrink. I wanted to prove to myself that I still existed, even when nobody saw me.
Let me tell you what I learned from Victor, and from Anna, and from the countless other stories like theirs I heard over the years. Wealth doesn't corrupt people. Fear does. Fear of losing what you have. Fear of not having enough, even when you have more than most people will see in a lifetime. That fear turns everything into competition. It makes you see other people as threats instead of humans. Victor came to me because he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed some fundamental test of character. He was right. But here's what I told him, and what I'll tell you now. Failing doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human. What you do after the failure is what defines you. Most people never get their moment of clarity. They never have a homeless girl walk into their lives and hold up a mirror. They spend decades accumulating wealth and status and never once question what it's costing them internally. Victor got lucky. He got to see himself clearly, and he chose to change. Anna taught me something different. She taught me about dignity, about how the most radical thing you can do when the world tries to erase you is refuse to disappear. She didn't beg those CEOs for help. She challenged them. She created a scenario where their choices revealed their character. That takes a kind of courage that most of us never develop. But here's the uncomfortable truth that neither of them wanted to hear at first. They needed each other. Victor needed Anna to shake him awake. Anna needed Victor to prove that not everyone with power is lost. And both of them needed to be uncomfortable to grow. So, what's the lesson here? What do you take from this story that you can actually use in your life? First, understand that every interaction is a test. Not a test someone else is giving you, a test you're giving yourself. When you encounter someone with less power, less money, less status, how do you treat them? Do you see them? Do you listen? Or do you dismiss them as irrelevant to your world? Your answer to that question tells you more about your character than any success you've achieved. Second, cooperation is harder than competition, especially when resources feel scarce. But the most valuable things in life, the things that actually make life worth living, come from cooperation. Love, friendship, community, purpose. You can't compete your way into those things. You have to surrender. You have to trust. You have to believe that there's enough for everyone, even when your fear tells you there isn't. Third, don't wait for your moral test to arrive in a dramatic moment. It arrives every single day in small interactions. The way you speak to service workers, the way you respond to someone asking for help, the way you share credit or resources or attention. Those small moments compound over time into the person you actually are, not the person you think you are or want to be. And finally, if you realize you failed, if you look in the mirror and don't like what you see, don't spiral into self-hatred. Change requires honest assessment, not punishment. Victor didn't fix everything overnight. He still struggled with impulses toward competition and control, but he was aware of them now. And awareness is always the first step toward transformation. I want to ask you something before we finish. Have you ever had a moment where someone with less than you showed you something about yourself you didn't want to see? Or have you been the person with less, trying to be seen, trying to matter? Tell me in the comments. I read them. I want to know your story, because every story like this adds to our collective understanding of what it means to be human. Anna still works at Victor's company. She moved up 3 times in 2 years. She's studying psychology now, part-time while she works. She wants to understand people the way I spent my life trying to understand them. Maybe she'll do it better. Maybe she already does. Victor retired last year. He spends his time mentoring young entrepreneurs now, especially ones from difficult backgrounds. He told me recently that he's happier now than he was when he was running an empire. Because purpose, real purpose, doesn't come from accumulation. It comes from contribution. The other 2 CEOs, Marcus and Diane, I don't know what happened to them. Victor tried to reach out once to tell them about Anna, about what he'd learned. They never responded. Some people aren't ready to look in the mirror. Some people never will be. But you're here listening to this story, which means you're asking questions. You're looking for meaning. You're willing to examine your own life and wonder if there's more, if there's better, if there's a version of yourself that's wiser and kinder and more whole. That willingness is everything. That's the seed of transformation. So here's what I want you to remember. The next time you're tested, and you will be tested, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself not what you'll gain or lose,
but who you'll be on the other side of the choice. Ask yourself if the person you're about to become is someone you can live with. Because we all have to live with ourselves eventually, and that relationship, the one you have with yourself in the quiet moments, is the one that determines everything else. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And wherever you're watching from, whatever you're carrying, I hope this story gave you something useful, something true. Drop a comment and let me know where you are in the world. I love knowing this community stretches everywhere. Until next time, take care of yourselves.